My name is Michael Thornton. At 41, I was what most would consider the epitome of professional success. Senior Vice President at Meridian Consulting, one of the most prestigious Fortune 500 companies headquartered in downtown Chicago. I had everything that conventionally signified achievement in corporate America. The sprawling corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, the respect and admiration of colleagues across the industry, and what I believed was a rock-solid marriage of 15 years to my college sweetheart, Elaine. That we lived in a 3,200 square foot luxury condominium in the prestigious Gold Coast neighborhood, a property we purchased 7 years ago for just under $1.8 million. Our home was meticulously curated, filled with art pieces we'd collected during our extensive travels across Europe and Asia, custom-designed furniture that Elaine had spent months selecting from exclusive designers, and all the high-end electronics and amenities that reflected our shared success. At least, that's what I believed we were building, a life of shared dreams, mutual respect, and unwavering commitment. As it turns out, perception and reality can exist in entirely different universes. Elaine and I first crossed paths during our sophomore year at Northwestern University. I still remember the moment vividly. It was during a campus fundraising event in the fall of 1999. She was volunteering at the art auction booth, her auburn hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders as she enthusiastically described the student artwork to potential bidders. I was instantly captivated, not just by her striking appearance, but by the passionate way she spoke about each piece, as though she had a personal connection to the artist. That I was studying finance and business management, spending most of my waking hours buried in economics textbooks and financial models. Elaine was pursuing art history with a minor in museum studies, her schedule filled with studio visits and gallery exhibitions. We were from different worlds, intellectually speaking, which is perhaps what made our connection so intriguing. She brought color and creativity into my methodical, numbers-driven life, while I offered stability and pragmatism to balance her artistic sensibilities. Our courtship was something out of a romantic comedy, awkward coffee dates where I tried desperately to sound knowledgeable about Renaissance painters, weekend trips to small art galleries in Wisconsin where Elaine would spend hours analyzing a single painting while I pretended to see whatever hidden meaning she was describing. Looking back now, I wonder if I misinterpreted her patience with my artistic ignorance as affection, when perhaps it was merely tolerance. We dated throughout college, and despite the occasional friction that arose from our different interests and temperaments, we seemed to complement each other well. When I received my acceptance letter to Wharton's MBA program and Elaine was offered an internship at a prestigious Chicago gallery, we made the decision to maintain a long-distance relationship. Those 2 years were challenging, but we persevered, speaking daily and alternating weekend visits between Philadelphia and Chicago. After completing my MBA, I returned to Chicago and proposed to Elaine during a private viewing at the Art Institute, arranging for us to be alone in the Impressionist gallery after hours. She said yes immediately, tears streaming down her face as I slipped the 2-carat emerald-cut diamond ring on her finger, a ring that had cost me nearly all of my signing bonus from my first post-MBA position at a boutique consulting firm. We married in the summer of 2007, a lavish ceremony at the Chicago Botanic Garden with 250 guests, followed by a 3-week honeymoon touring the art capitals of Europe, Paris, Florence, Rome, Barcelona. It was during this trip that we purchased our first significant piece together, a small but authentic Picasso sketch that cost more than my annual salary at the time. I remember Elaine's face as we completed the purchase, a look of pure exhilaration that I mistakenly believed was directed at our shared future rather than the acquisition itself. The early years of our marriage coincided with my rapid professional ascent. I moved from the boutique firm to a mid-sized consultancy, then to Deloitte, and finally landed at Meridian Consulting by my 35th birthday. Each career move came with substantial increases in compensation and responsibility. By the time I joined Meridian as a director, my annual compensation package exceeded $450,000, with significant performance bonuses that often doubled that figured as my professional responsibilities grew. Elaine's career took a different trajectory. She had been working as an assistant curator at a respected Chicago gallery, but when I received my offer from Meridian, She suggested that perhaps it was time for her to step back from her professional obligations. Her reasoning seemed sound. At the time, my new position would require extensive entertaining, networking events, and occasional travel. She argued that having one of us focused on maintaining our home and social calendar would benefit us both in the long run. Your career is taking off, Michael, she said during that conversation. And let's be honest, the financial compensation from my gallery position is negligible compared to what you're bringing in. It makes more sense for me to support your career by creating the perfect home environment and social network. I supported her decision without hesitation. Money wasn't an issue, and if that's what would make her happy, I was all for it. In retrospect, I should have questioned whether her decision was truly about supporting us as a couple, or if it was the first step in a calculated plan to access my increasing wealth without contributing meaningfully to it. Elaine threw herself into her new role with impressive dedication. Our condo was redecorated by one of Chicago's most exclusive interior designers, transforming it into a showcase that regularly appeared in architectural magazines. She joined the women's boards of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and the Museum of Contemporary Art, positioning herself as a tastemaker and socialite among Chicago's elite. She organized dinner parties for my colleagues and clients that were acclaimed for their impeccable food, wine, and ambience. She accompanied me to industry conferences in resort locations, charming the spouses of potential clients while I handled the business discussions. From all external appearances, we were the perfect power couple, the brilliant consultant and his sophisticated, culturally refined wife. For years, things seemed fine, even exceptional. We traveled extensively: Tokyo, Singapore, Paris, London, Rome, collecting art and luxury items from each destination. When I received my promotion to senior vice president at Meridian, we celebrated by purchasing a vacation property in Napa Valley, a small vineyard estate that we visited several times a year. We discussed having children, but ultimately decided against it. A mutual decision, as our lifestyle revolved around spontaneous travel, late-night social events, and professional commitments that left little room for the demands of parenthood. I believed we had a fulfilling life, different from what we might have imagined in our college days, perhaps, but successful by any conventional measure. Elaine had her social circles, charity events, and art functions. I had my thriving career and the satisfaction of providing a life of luxury for us both. It never occurred to me that beneath the polished surface of our marriage, resentment and discontent might be brewing. If I'm being completely honest with myself, there were warning signs long before the final betrayal. Small inconsistencies in Elaine's stories about her whereabouts, inexplicable expenses on our shared credit cards, a gradual cooling of physical intimacy. These were subtle shifts, easily rationalized or overlooked amid the demands of my 60-hour work weeks and frequent business travel. But I remember one particular incident about 9 months before everything fell apart. I had returned early from a client meeting to find Elaine hurriedly ending a phone call in our home office. When I asked who she was speaking with, she mentioned a florist regarding arrangements for an upcoming charity gala. Later that evening, I noticed a text notification on her phone as it lay on our kitchen counter, a message from someone named Jay that read simply, "Miss you already. Same time Thursday." When I casually inquired about it, Elaine explained that Jay was Jennifer, the new event coordinator for the Symphony Board, and they were meeting to discuss the annual fundraiser. The explanation seemed reasonable, and I thought nothing more of it. Now, of course, I understand that Jay was Jason, and their reconnection had already begun. There were other signs too. Elaine began taking greater interest in her appearance, scheduling regular sessions with a personal trainer, refreshing her wardrobe with more youthful, fashion-forward pieces. She colored her hair, experimented with new makeup techniques. At the time, I found these changes attractive and assumed they were for my benefit, or perhaps a response to the natural anxieties of approaching 40. That our social circle had begun to shift as well. Elaine started declining invitations to events with my colleagues and their spouses, claiming they were boring or too corporate. Instead, she gravitated toward a new group of friends, primarily divorced or single women who frequented Chicago's trendier restaurants and nightclubs. When I expressed concern about some of these new associations, Elaine accused me of being controlling and old-fashioned. Just because we're married doesn't mean we have to spend every waking moment together, she said during one particularly heated discussion. You have your work friends and business dinners. I should be allowed to have my own social life too. Her reasoning seemed valid, and not wanting to appear possessive, I backed off. This, I now realize, provided her with the perfect cover to rekindle her relationship with Jason without arousing my suspicion. Our finances, too, showed subtle but significant changes. Elaine had always enjoyed the privilege of unrestricted access to our accounts. We maintained separate credit cards but paid them from joint funds. In the 6 months leading up to her departure, her monthly expenditures increased by nearly 40%, with numerous charges from high-end retailers, spas, and restaurants I'd never heard of. When I mentioned the uptick in spending, she dismissed my concerns with vague references to inflation and the rising cost of maintaining our social obligations. What I didn't discover until after she left was that she had also been gradually moving money from our joint investment account into a private account under her maiden name. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, amounts that wouldn't immediately trigger my attention amid our considerable assets. Over 8 months, she had diverted nearly $180,000. Last November, Meridian was pursuing a major acquisition of a Japanese technology firm specializing in advanced supply chain management systems. As the senior executive with the most experience in international business development, I was assigned to lead the negotiation team in Tokyo. This was a career-defining opportunity. If successful, the acquisition would increase Meridian's market valuation by an estimated 18% and position us as the leading consultancy for global logistics optimization. The assignment would require 3 weeks in Tokyo, the longest Elaine and I had been apart since our marriage. When I informed her of the trip, her reaction was surprisingly enthusiastic. "That's wonderful news, Michael," she said, embracing me with unusual warmth. "This could be the stepping stone to that COO position you've been eyeing. And don't worry about me. 3 weeks will fly by. I've got so many projects and events to keep me occupied." Her support seemed genuine, and I was grateful for it. In the days leading up to my departure, Elaine was attentive and affectionate, helping me pack appropriate attire for the formal business culture of Japan, researching Japanese business etiquette so I could avoid any cultural faux pas, and even arranging for a custom-made suit from my preferred tailor to be rush-delivered before my flight. The morning of my departure, she personally drove me to O'Hare International Airport, an unusual gesture given that we typically used a car service for airport transportation. At the terminal, she kissed me goodbye with surprising intensity. "I'll miss you," she said, straightening my tie one last time. "But don't worry about me. I've got plenty to keep me busy. Just focus on closing this deal. I know how important it is for your career." If only I had recognized the calculated nature of her support, the convenient timing of my extended absence. If only I had paid attention to the slight tremor in her voice, the way her eyes couldn't quite meet mine as she assured me she'd be fine on her own. But I was preoccupied with the complex negotiation ahead, mentally reviewing my strategy for navigating the cultural and financial complexities of the acquisition. The Tokyo negotiations were even more demanding than anticipated, 18-hour days filled with meetings, due diligence reviews, financial modeling, and strategic discussions that often extended well past midnight. The 14-hour time difference between Chicago and Tokyo made communication with home difficult. When I called Elaine, it was either very early morning or late evening in Chicago, and our conversations were brief and often interrupted by her apparent social obligations. "Sorry, can't talk long," she would say. "I'm just heading out to meet the girls for dinner," or "I'm at the gallery installation and it's too noisy to hear you properly." During our second week apart, our communication became increasingly sporadic. Elaine stopped answering my evening calls, her morning, claiming she was taking early yoga classes. My morning calls, her evening, went to voicemail more often than not. When we did connect, her responses to my questions about her activities were vague and evasive. "Oh, you know, the usual," she would say. "Meetings, events, shopping. Nothing you'd find interesting." I attributed her distraction to the challenges of the time difference and my own preoccupation with the high-stakes negotiation. In one of our last conversations before my scheduled return, Elaine asked detailed questions about my arrival time and whether I would be coming straight home from the airport or stopping at the office first. I told her my flight was scheduled to arrive at 7:30 p.m. on Thursday and that I planned to come directly home, despite pressure from the office to debrief immediately. Actually, she said after a pause, I've planned a small welcome home gathering with some of your colleagues for Friday evening. So if you need to go to the office first on Thursday, that's completely fine. I'll probably be out until late anyway, finalizing arrangements for the party. Again, I failed to recognize the manipulation. In her suggestion, the way she was managing my movements to accommodate her own agenda. The acquisition negotiations reached a critical phase during my final week in Tokyo. The Japanese firm's leadership had agreed to our financial terms, but remained concerned about corporate culture integration and potential workforce reductions. I spent 72 nearly sleepless hours mediating between our legal team, their executive board, and the anxious representatives of their labor union. By Tuesday evening, we had reached a tentative agreement that satisfied all parties. Meridian would acquire the Japanese firm at a 15% discount to market value, with guaranteed employment for 92% of existing staff and a phased integration plan that preserved key elements of their corporate culture. Our CEO was ecstatic, calling it the deal of the decade during our video conference briefing. The success created an unexpected opportunity. With the main objectives achieved ahead of schedule and only the final documentation remaining for the legal teams to process, I suddenly had the option to return to Chicago 2 days earlier than planned. My original flight was scheduled for Thursday evening, arriving in Chicago around 7:30 p.m. local time after the 13-hour journey. Now, I could take the Tuesday night flight instead, arriving Wednesday afternoon. I debated whether to inform Elaine of my early return. Part of me wanted to surprise her, to see the look of joy on her face when I walked through our door unexpectedly. Another part felt I should give her notice, allowing her to prepare for my arrival. After some consideration, I decided on the surprise. After 3 weeks apart and the successful conclusion of such an important deal, the romantic gesture seemed appropriate. I instructed my assistant to keep my early return confidential. I would still technically be in Tokyo, according to my official schedule, giving me a day to recover from jet lag before facing the inevitable barrage of meetings and debriefs at the office. The only people aware of my changed plans were the executive assistant to the CEO and the Meridian travel coordinator who arranged my new flight. The return journey was grueling, a 13-hour flight in business class that, despite the relative comfort, left me exhausted and disoriented. As we approached O'Hare on Wednesday afternoon, I felt a surge of anticipation. In just an hour or so, I would be home, reunited with Elaine, able to share the details of my professional triumph and finally relax in familiar surroundings that I collected my luggage and passed through customs in a jet-lagged haze, then took a taxi directly to our condominium building. It was around 3:30 p.m. when I arrived, a time when Elaine would typically be home, perhaps preparing for an evening event or catching up on correspondence for her various board positions. As the elevator ascended to our floor, I mentally rehearsed my entrance, the surprise in her eyes, the embrace we would share, the bottle of rare Japanese whiskey I had purchased at duty-free as a gift. Never once did I imagine the scene that actually awaited me. The moment I inserted my key into our front door, something felt profoundly wrong. The weight and resistance of the door seemed different, as if the space beyond it had fundamentally changed. As it swung open, I was struck by an acoustic emptiness. The space echoed in a way it never had before. The ambient sounds of our home altered in a manner I couldn't immediately identify. "Elaine," I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the strangely resonant space. There was no answer. I stepped into our foyer, dropping my luggage beside the console table where we kept our mail and keys. Except the console table was gone. In its place was nothing but dust outlines on the hardwood floor, marking where its legs had once stood. A wave of confusion washed over me as I moved further into our home. The disorientation of jet lag combined with the surreal alteration of familiar space created a dreamlike quality to the moment. I remember thinking, absurdly, that perhaps I had entered the wrong unit, though that was clearly impossible. Our living room came into view, and the scope of what had happened began to register. The Italian leather sectional sofa that had cost Us $22,000 gone. The custom glass coffee table from Milan gone. The 85-inch OLED television that had been mounted on the wall gone, leaving only mounting brackets and exposed wiring. The Giacometti sculpture we had purchased in Paris for our 10th anniversary, insured for $95,000, gone. I moved through the space in stunned disbelief, room by room, cataloging the absences. In the dining room, our handcrafted walnut table, with seating for 12, had vanished, along with the antique credenza that had displayed our collection of crystal and silver. The kitchen appeared mostly intact, though I later discovered that all our high-end appliances, the Vitamix, the espresso machine, the sous vide equipment, had been removed, but it was our bedroom that truly drove home the magnitude of the situation. Elaine's closet stood completely empty. Not a single garment, shoe, or accessory remained. The wall of built-in drawers that had contained her extensive collection of jewelry and accessories was similarly vacant, save for a few items she had apparently deemed not valuable enough to take. My closet and personal items remained untouched, a stark contrast that eliminated any possibility that this was a random burglary. Our en-suite bathroom told the same story. Her extensive collection of luxury skincare products, perfumes, and cosmetics had been cleared out, while my side of the double vanity remained perfectly intact. Most disturbing of all were the walls throughout our home. Every piece of artwork, from museum-quality pieces to personal photographs, had been removed. The pale rectangles on the paint where frames had hung for years created a ghostly negative image of our life together. Particularly gutting was the empty space where our wedding portrait had hung in the hallway. A 30 by 40 black and white image in a custom silver frame that had always drawn compliments from visitors. That I stood in the center of our bedroom, mobile phone in hand, and called Elaine. The call went straight to voicemail. I texted, "Where are you? What's happened to our home? Call me immediately." No response. I called again and again and again, each attempt ending with the same cheerful recording of her voice asking me to leave a message. In a state of escalating panic, I began calling her friends. Amanda, her yoga instructor friend, claimed to have no idea where Elaine might be, though I could hear the hesitation in her voice. Sarah, her co-chair on the symphony board, gave similarly vague responses, avoiding direct answers to my increasingly desperate questions. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Initial surprise at hearing I was back from Tokyo, followed by unconvincing expressions of ignorance regarding Elaine's whereabouts. Finally, I called Catherine, Elaine's younger sister. Catherine and I had never been particularly close. She had always maintained a certain cool distance, as if reserving judgment on whether I was truly good enough for her sister. When she answered, I dispensed with pleasantries. "Catherine, it's Michael. I need to speak with Elaine immediately. Half our belongings are missing, and she's not answering her phone." There was a long pause before Catherine responded. "She's not with me, Michael. I didn't ask if she was with you. I asked where she is." Another pause, longer this time. "I don't think I should get involved in this." "Catherine," I said, my voice breaking slightly, "I've just returned from 3 weeks in Tokyo to find my home half empty and my wife missing. Please, I'm begging you, tell me what you know." Her sigh was audible through the phone. "She's with Jason," she finally said. "She's been planning this for months. She said you'd figure it out eventually, that you'd understand once you had time to think about it." The name hit me like a physical blow. Jason. Jason Mercer. Elaine's first serious boyfriend from college, before she and I had met. The one she had dated for nearly 3 years. The one who had broken things off abruptly during their senior year to pursue a job opportunity in California. The one she had claimed to be completely over, yet whose name would occasionally emerge during nostalgic conversations about her college days. "Jason Mercer?" I asked, needing confirmation despite already knowing the answer. "Yes," Catherine replied, her tone softening slightly. "He moved back to Chicago about a year ago. They reconnected at a Northwestern alumni event last spring." "I'm sorry, Michael." I told her this was a terrible way to handle things, but she was adamant that making a clean break was best for everyone. "A clean break?" I repeated incredulously. "She's taken half our possessions. That's not a clean break. That's theft. She says it's only what's rightfully hers, things she selected and that holds sentimental value for her," Catherine responded, a defensive edge returning to her voice. Look, I've already said more than I should. This is between you and Elaine. Where are they? I need to speak with her directly. I can't tell you that, Michael. She specifically asked me not to. She'll contact you when she's ready. With that, Catherine ended the call, leaving me standing in the empty shell of my home, struggling to process the simultaneous personal and material loss I had just discovered. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of shock, rage, and procedural activities. After my conversation with Catherine, I spent several hours documenting the state of our home, photographing empty spaces where valuable items had been, and creating an initial inventory of missing possessions. I contacted our building's management office and security desk, discovering that Elaine had informed them I had authorized a moving company to remove selected items for renovation purposes during my absence. She had even provided a falsified email from my account. Apparently, she had access to my personal email, something I had never realized. The security footage from our building showed a professional moving team arriving over 3 consecutive days, efficiently removing artwork, furniture, and numerous boxes under Elaine's supervision. The final day of moving activity had been just 48 hours before my early return. Had I come back on my original schedule, I would never have seen the movers in action. My next call was to our bank, where I learned that Elaine had withdrawn $50,000 from our joint account the previous week, the maximum cash withdrawal allowed without additional verification. A review of our credit card statements revealed numerous recent charges I didn't recognize: a storage facility in Lincoln Park, several high-end restaurants I had never heard of, charges at luxury hotels in Chicago, despite us owning a home there, and a significant purchase at a high-end jewelry store 2 days before my discovery. Still operating in a state of semi-shock, I took the precautionary measure of freezing our joint accounts and credit cards. I contacted our insurance company to report the missing items and initiated the process of filing a claim, though they informed me that theft by a spouse complicated matters considerably from an insurance perspective. Sleep eluded me that night. As I lay in our bed, now just my bed, replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for signs I might have missed, warnings I had ignored. By morning, grief had hardened into something more functional: determination. I needed professional assistance to navigate this situation. My first call was to Patricia Winters, managing partner at Winters, Dawson and McHenry, widely regarded as the most formidable divorce attorneys in Chicago. Their firm was known particularly for representing high-net-worth individuals in contentious divorces involving significant assets and allegations of financial impropriety. The earliest available appointment was 3 days out, but after explaining the urgency of my situation, I was offered a 7 a.m. meeting the following morning. My second call was to Blackridge Security and Investigations, a firm recommended by Meridian's corporate security director. By noon, I was sitting across from Martin Reeves, a former FBI financial crimes investigator who now specialized in cases involving asset concealment and relationship deception. What you're describing is unfortunately not uncommon in my line of work, Reeves said after I had outlined the situation. Based on the timing and methodical nature of the property removal, this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This type of execution suggests planning over weeks, possibly months. I authorized Reeves to conduct a comprehensive investigation into Elaine's activities over the past year, with particular focus on her relationship with Jason Mercer. The retainer was substantial: $25,000 for the initial investigation. But at that point, I would have paid any amount to understand what had happened and why. Within 72 hours, Reeves had compiled a preliminary report that confirmed my worst suspicions, while adding details that made the betrayal even more painful in its calculation. Jason Mercer had indeed returned to Chicago approximately 14 months earlier, following his divorce from his wife of 7 years. He had established a boutique real estate development company focused on converting industrial properties into luxury residential spaces. According to Reeves' sources, the business was heavy on style but light on substance. Mercer had leveraged his considerable charm and social connections to secure funding, but several of his projects were behind schedule and over budget. Elaine and Jason had reconnected at a Northwestern alumni fundraiser 11 months ago. Surveillance photographs from Reeves' team showed them meeting at various upscale restaurants and hotels around Chicago over the past 8 months, always in locations unlikely to be frequented by my professional contacts. There were images of them entering and leaving a luxury apartment building in River North, presumably Jason's residence or a property associated with his development company. Most damning were the photographs from the 3-week period of my Tokyo assignment. They documented Elaine and Jason supervising movers as they transported items from our condominium to both a storage facility and the River North apartment. There were images of them dining at Alinea, attending a performance at the Lyric Opera, and shopping together on Michigan Avenue, living openly as a couple while I was thousands of miles away, focused entirely on the business deal that I thought would further strengthen our financial future. Reeves had also uncovered financial connections between Elaine and Jason that predated my Tokyo trip. Elaine had opened a private bank account 6 months earlier, into which she had been transferring funds from our joint accounts. She had established a limited liability company registered in her maiden name, which had recently made a $200,000 investment in one of Jason's development projects. The source of these funds was almost certainly our joint assets, methodically diverted over time. Based on what we've uncovered, Reeves concluded during our follow-up meeting, this relationship resumed approximately 11 months ago. The financial entanglement began roughly 6 months ago. The plan to remove property from your shared residence was likely formalized within the last 8 to 10 weeks, with careful execution during your extended absence. The methodical nature of the betrayal was perhaps the most difficult aspect to process. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, a brief affair conducted in the heat of passion. This was a calculated extraction of affection, of assets, of a shared life, executed with the precision of a military operation. My meeting with Patricia Winters the morning after my return was both devastating and clarifying. I arrived at her Michigan Avenue office carrying a binder containing all the documentation I had compiled, photographs of our emptied home, preliminary inventory of missing items with approximate values, financial records showing unusual transactions, and building security logs confirming the removal of property. Patricia was not what I had expected. Rather than the aggressive, hard-edged personality I had anticipated, she was a composed, elegant woman in her late 50s with a calm demeanor that belied her reputation as one of Chicago's most fearsome divorce attorneys. Her office was tastefully appointed in muted grays and blues, with views of Millennium Park and Lake Michigan beyond. Before we discuss strategy, Mr. Thornton, I need to understand your objectives, she said after reviewing my materials. Are you hoping for reconciliation, or are you preparing for divorce proceedings? The question momentarily stunned me. In the chaos of discovery and documentation, I hadn't actually articulated to myself what outcome I was seeking. But facing the question directly, I found clarity. Divorce, I replied without hesitation. After this level of deception and theft, reconciliation isn't an option I would consider. Patricia nodded approvingly. Good. Clarity of purpose is essential in these situations. Now, based on what you've shared, your wife has made several significant, tactical errors that strengthen our position considerably. She proceeded to outline the legal implications of Elaine's actions. The removal of property without consent during a marriage, particularly in such a calculated manner while I was out of the country, constituted what Illinois law termed dissipation of marital assets, the use or waste of marital property for a non-marital purpose when the marriage is undergoing an irretrievable breakdown. The timing is particularly problematic for her, Patricia explained. Had she removed these items after formally filing for divorce and receiving temporary possession orders, she would have been on firmer legal ground. By taking them secretly, before any legal proceedings were initiated, she significantly compromised her position. Patricia recommended a multifaceted approach. First, we would file for divorce on grounds of adultery and mental cruelty, with specific allegations regarding the theft of property. Simultaneously, we would file police reports for the missing items, which would be classified as theft since no divorce proceedings had been initiated at the time of their removal. Won't that seem extreme? I asked. Filing criminal charges against my own wife. It establishes the seriousness of her actions and creates an official record, Patricia replied. Whether the state chooses to pursue charges is another matter. But the documentation will be valuable in divorce proceedings and potential civil recovery actions. She also advised seeking emergency court orders to freeze any additional assets and to prevent the sale or transfer of the removed items. Additionally, she recommended filing for exclusive possession of our condominium, preventing Elaine from returning or making further claims on the property. What about her relationship with Jason Mercer? I asked. The investigator found evidence they've been involved for nearly a year. Adultery can influence property division in Illinois, Patricia explained. While we're technically a no-fault divorce state, judges have discretion in dividing marital assets. Evidence of adultery, particularly when combined with financial misconduct, often results in more favorable settlements for the wronged spouse. There was a strategic element to our filing timeline as well. Rather than immediately serving Elaine with divorce papers, Patricia suggested we complete our documentation and file the necessary emergency motions first. This approach would allow us to secure court orders protecting the remaining assets before Elaine was formally notified of the proceedings. Your wife is already demonstrating a pattern of deception and asset concealment, Patricia noted. Once she realizes you're pursuing divorce, she may accelerate her efforts to shield or liquidate assets. We need to be several steps ahead. I authorized Patricia to proceed according to her recommendations, signing engagement letters and providing a substantial retainer. For the next 2 weeks, we worked methodically to build our case. I took inventory of everything that remained in our home and everything I could remember being removed. Patricia's team conducted asset searches to identify any additional accounts or properties Elaine might have established. The private investigator continued monitoring Elaine's activities, documenting her movements and interactions with Jason. 23 days after my return from Tokyo, our preparations were complete. Patricia filed our petition for dissolution of marriage, along with emergency motions for temporary restraining orders regarding assets, exclusive possession of the condominium, and preservation of evidence. The court granted our emergency motions the same day, placing legal holds on all identified assets and formally prohibiting the sale or transfer of any property removed from our home. The following morning, Elaine was served with divorce papers at Jason's River North apartment. Within hours, my phone exploded with notifications, texts, calls, voicemails from Elaine, from Jason, from mutual friends, and family members. Following Patricia's strict instructions, I did not respond to any of them. All communication would now go through legal channels. Elaine's attorney, a junior partner at a firm primarily known for real estate transactions, contacted Patricia that afternoon, requesting an emergency meeting to discuss this unfortunate misunderstanding and explore amicable resolutions. Patricia's response was as concise as it was devastating. There is no misunderstanding. Your client has stolen property valued at approximately $347,000 based on our preliminary inventory. She has diverted marital funds exceeding $230,000 to private accounts and unauthorized investments. She has engaged in a documented adulterous relationship for approximately 11 months. We have surveillance photographs, financial records, and witness statements confirming all of the above. We'll address these matters in court, not in private meetings designed to mitigate your client's exposure. Elaine's initial legal response was as weak as Patricia had predicted. Her attorney filed countermotions attempting to characterize the removed items as personal property gifted to her during the marriage and claiming that the funds transferred to her private accounts were savings from household allowances that Mr. Thornton had designated as her discretionary funds. The judge assigned to our case, the Honorable Rebecca Martinez, was unpersuaded by these arguments, maintaining the temporary orders while setting an expedited discovery schedule. Over the next 6 weeks, the case moved through preliminary hearings and mandatory financial disclosures. Each filing revealed more about the extent of Elaine's deception. She had established not one but 3 separate bank accounts, transferring incrementally larger sums as her relationship with Jason progressed. She had made substantial investments in his real estate ventures, effectively funneling my earnings into his struggling business. She had even taken out a $75,000 personal loan using our joint assets as collateral the proceeds of which had also been invested in Jason's company. During her deposition, Elaine attempted to paint our marriage as emotionally barren, claiming, "I had been distant and work-obsessed, leaving her starved for affection and companionship." She portrayed her reconnection with Jason as an emotional life raft in a sea of loneliness. Patricia systematically dismantled this narrative, producing emails and text messages in which Elaine had expressed contentment with our lifestyle, appreciation for the financial security I provided, and enthusiasm for my career advancement. Most damaging to Elaine's claims were the text messages between her and Jason, obtained through subpoena. Far from revealing a relationship built on profound emotional connection, they displayed a mutual opportunism that was breathtaking in its callousness. "M is leaving for Tokyo tomorrow," Elaine had written 3 weeks before my ill-fated business trip. 3 weeks alone. Perfect timing for Operation Extraction. Jason's response: "The universe providing for those who deserve it. Time to upgrade your life, babe. His loss, my gain." There were detailed discussions about which items to take, their approximate values, and which items to leave behind to avoid immediate suspicion if I returned early. There were calculations of how much money could be safely transferred without triggering alerts. There were even jokes about my obliviousness to their affair, with Elaine mocking my trust in her. "He actually thinks I'm organizing a welcome home dinner for him," she had texted Jason the day before my planned return. "If only he knew I'll be welcoming him with an empty house instead." When these messages were presented during discovery, Elaine's attorney immediately requested a recess and subsequently approached Patricia about settlement discussions. Their initial offer was laughable. Elaine would return selected items of sentimental value and repay $50,000 of the diverted funds in exchange for a complete release of all other claims that Patricia's counter was appropriately severe. Elaine would return all removed items in their original condition, repay all diverted funds plus interest, cover all my legal expenses and investigation costs, and relinquish any claim to our condominium, investment accounts, or future earnings. Additionally, she would provide a full accounting of all expenses incurred using marital funds during her relationship with Jason, with these amounts to be repaid to me as well. This counteroffer was rejected, though it established the boundaries for subsequent negotiations. Meanwhile, the case continued its progression toward trial, with each procedural step further strengthening my position and weakening Elaine's. As our legal proceedings advanced, external factors began to exert pressure on Elaine and Jason's relationship. The court had frozen the assets Elaine had transferred to Jason's company pending resolution of our divorce, creating immediate cash flow problems for his already precarious business ventures. Construction on his flagship development project stalled when contractors went unpaid, leading to liens being filed against the property. Jason's business partners and investors, alarmed by the legal entanglements and negative publicity surrounding his relationship with a married woman accused of significant asset concealment, began distancing themselves. 2 major investors withdrew from his newest project, citing reputational concerns. Industry events that had previously welcomed him as a rising star in Chicago real estate development now mysteriously failed to extend invitations. Financial pressure mounted quickly. With access to our marital assets restricted by court order, Elaine found herself in an increasingly precarious position. The lifestyle to which she had become accustomed required substantial ongoing investment: designer clothing, premium dining experiences, exclusive social events. These expenditures had been easily accommodated within our marriage, but became problematic when dependent solely on Jason's increasingly constrained resources. Approximately 3 months into our legal proceedings, my private investigator noted a marked shift in Elaine and Jason's patterns. Their appearances at high-end restaurants decreased, replaced by more modest establishments. Elaine's regular appointments at exclusive salons and spas became less frequent. They began spending more evenings at Jason's apartment rather than attending the social functions that had previously filled their calendar. The strain began to show in their relationship as well. The investigator documented a heated argument outside a restaurant in Lincoln Park, with Elaine gesturing emphatically and Jason assuming a defensive posture. On another occasion, Elaine was observed leaving Jason's building in apparent distress, getting into a taxi while wiping tears from her face. These observations aligned with information Patricia had received from her sources within Chicago's legal community. Elaine had consulted with two additional divorce attorneys, presumably seeking alternative perspectives on her position. Jason had met with a business bankruptcy specialist. Their united front was beginning to fracture under the combined weight of legal pressure and financial reality. 4 months after filing for divorce, we received confirmation of this deterioration in the form of a substantially revised settlement offer from Elaine's attorney. The new proposal conceded most of our major points. Elaine would return all identifiable property still in her possession, provide financial compensation for items that had been sold or could not be returned, repay diverted funds with interest, and relinquish all claims to our condominium and investment accounts. In exchange, she requested a modest lump sum payment that represented approximately 10% of our marital assets, significantly less than the 50% she might have reasonably expected had she pursued divorce through conventional means. Patricia advised that the offer, while improved, still didn't fully account for the legal expenses and investigative costs I had incurred, nor did it address the emotional damage inflicted by Elaine's calculated betrayal. We countered with a final position: complete surrender of all claims to marital assets, full financial restitution for diverted funds and missing property, and explicit acknowledgement of financial misconduct in the settlement agreement. While negotiations continued on the final details of our settlement, I received an unexpected text message from Jason Mercer's number. "We need to talk. Not about the case. About Elaine. Man to man." Against Patricia's explicit advice, I agreed to meet Jason at a neutral location, a hotel bar downtown where neither of us was likely to encounter acquaintances. I arrived early, selecting a secluded table with a view of the entrance, half expecting the meeting to be some kind of trap or manipulation. When Jason arrived, however, I was struck by how diminished he appeared compared to the confident figure in the surveillance photographs. His designer suit seemed slightly too large, as if he had lost weight. The easy charm he had reportedly wielded throughout his career was notably absent. "Thank you for meeting me," he began after ordering a scotch. "I know your attorney probably advised against it." "She did," I confirmed. "So this had better be worth my time." Jason took a substantial swallow of his drink before continuing. "I'm ending things with Elaine. I thought you should hear it from me directly, rather than through lawyers or investigators." I maintained a neutral expression, though internally I felt a complicated mix of vindication and renewed anger. "Why tell me? That's between you and her. Because you're still negotiating your divorce settlement, and this might influence your position." He paused, seemingly struggling with what to say next. "Look, Thornton, I'm not going to pretend I'm taking some moral high ground here. When Elaine and I reconnected, I was recently divorced, my business was struggling, and she represented opportunity. She had access to resources I needed, connections that could help my company, and yes, she was still beautiful, still the girl I remembered from college. So you encouraged her to steal from me," I stated flatly. Jason winced, but didn't deny it. "I told myself it wasn't stealing, that she deserved these things after years of playing the corporate wife role. That was the narrative she presented, and I chose to believe it. And now I understand there were two sides to that story," he admitted. "And more importantly, I've realized that someone who would methodically deceive a spouse of 15 years would eventually do the same to me." He finished his drink and signaled for another. 3 days ago, I discovered that Elaine has been meeting with Richard Forrester." The name was immediately familiar. Richard Forrester was one of Chicago's most successful commercial real estate developers, a man in his early 60s with a reputation for both professional brilliance and personal indiscretion, particularly regarding younger women. "Forrester could fund my stalled projects with his pocket change," Jason continued bitterly. "He's everything I aspired to be in this industry, and apparently, Elaine's been exploring her options with him for at least 6 weeks. So much for our great reconnected college romance." I sat in silence, absorbing this information and its implications. After a moment, I asked, "Why should I believe you?" Jason retrieved his phone, pulled up an image, and slid it across the table. It showed Elaine and Forrester at what appeared to be an intimate dinner, his hand visibly covering hers on the table. "There are more explicit ones from later that evening," Jason added. "But I think this makes the point." I pushed the phone back toward him without comment. I'm not asking for your sympathy, Jason said, pocketing the device. I made my choices. But I thought you deserved to know that the woman fighting for a portion of your assets is already positioning herself for her next upgrade. Our conversation lasted perhaps 20 more minutes, with Jason providing additional details about Elaine's recent behavior and apparent plans. As we prepared to leave, I found myself asking the question that had haunted me since discovering the betrayal. Was any of it real for her? At any point, Jason considered the question with surprising thoughtfulness. I think Elaine loves the idea of love, he finally said. She loves the narrative of meaningful connection, of profound understanding. But actual love requires sacrifice and compromise, which I've never seen her demonstrate with either of us. I relayed the substance of this conversation to Patricia the following morning. She was professionally disapproving of my having met with Jason without legal representation, but pragmatically interested in how his information might be leveraged in our ongoing negotiations. Within days, we received word that Elaine was now prepared to accept our settlement terms without further contest. The final agreement, signed 6 months after my return from Tokyo, was even more favorable than Patricia had initially thought possible. Elaine relinquished all claims to our marital assets, agreed to comprehensive financial restitution, and accepted a confidentiality provision preventing her from discussing our marriage or divorce with media outlets. In exchange, she received a lump sum payment that, while substantial in absolute terms, represented less than 8% of our marital estate, an outcome virtually unheard of in Illinois divorce proceedings. As for Jason, his business troubles continued to escalate. With investors withdrawing and projects stalled, his company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection 8 months after my Tokyo return. He eventually relocated to Denver, reportedly to work for a cousin's residential construction firm, his dreams of becoming a prominent Chicago developer thoroughly extinguished. And Richard Forrester? His interest in Elaine proved as transient as I might have expected. According to my investigator, who continued periodic monitoring at my request, their relationship lasted approximately 7 weeks before Forrester moved on to his next interest, a pattern well established throughout his career. The period following the finalization of my divorce was one of profound reassessment and gradual rebuilding. The condominium that had once been our shared home felt simultaneously too empty and too full of memories. After considerable deliberation, I decided against selling it immediately. Real estate in our building represented a sound investment, and I was reluctant to make major financial decisions while still processing the emotional aftermath of Elaine's betrayal. Instead, I hired an interior designer with instructions to completely reimagine the space. Every wall was repainted, all flooring replaced, kitchen and bathrooms renovated. I selected new furniture with an aesthetic entirely different from what Elaine and I had shared, clean, contemporary lines replacing the more traditional styles she had preferred. The only items I retained from our marriage were a few pieces of art I had personally selected during our travels, pieces that held meaning for me independent of our relationship. Professionally, the Tokyo acquisition proved to be the career advancement opportunity one had anticipated. Meridian's executive committee, impressed by both the financial terms I had secured and my handling of the complex cross-cultural negotiations, promoted me to executive vice president with expanded responsibilities and compensation. The promotion came with the option to relocate to Meridian's New York or London offices, but I chose to remain in Chicago. Despite the painful associations, the city was my home, and I refused to be driven from it by unpleasant memories that my colleagues at Meridian had been surprisingly supportive throughout the divorce proceedings. While I had maintained appropriate discretion regarding the specific circumstances, the basic facts of Elaine's departure during my business trip had become known. Many expressed outrage on my behalf, and several who had previously included Elaine and me in social gatherings made point of continuing to include me as an individual. Gradually, I reestablished a social life independent of my marriage. I reconnected with college friends who had drifted to the periphery during my years with Elaine. I accepted invitations to events I would have previously declined due to her preferences. I discovered activities and interests that had never been part of our shared experience: sailing on Lake Michigan, architectural photography, volunteering at a legal aid clinic providing financial literacy education to underserved communities. Dating, when I eventually felt ready to consider it, proved to be an unexpected challenge. At 43, newly divorced, with a demanding career and substantial assets, I found myself approached primarily by women who seemed interested in my professional status and financial security rather than in me as an individual. The experience of Elaine's calculated betrayal had left me hyper-vigilant to signs of similar motivations, perhaps unfairly so. Eventually, on the advice of a trusted colleague, I engaged a matchmaking service that specialized in connecting high-achieving professionals based on genuine compatibility of values, interests, and life goals. This proved more successful, leading to several meaningful connections and eventually a relationship with Claire, a pediatric surgeon who approached life with a straightforwardness and ethical clarity I found deeply refreshing after Elaine's duplicity. For Elaine herself, I maintained my commitment to avoiding direct contact, though information occasionally reached me through mutual acquaintances or my still active investigator. Following the collapse of her relationship with Jason and the brief interlude with Richard Forrester, she had struggled to re-establish herself in Chicago society. The details of our divorce had not been publicly disclosed due to the confidentiality provisions, but enough was known within our social circle to create significant reputational damage. According to Catherine, with whom I had maintained occasional civil contact, Elaine had spent several months living in her spare bedroom following the divorce, a humbling experience for someone who had previously resided in one of Chicago's most prestigious addresses. She had eventually found employment at a suburban art gallery, a significant step down from her previous board positions and social prominence. She had also, Catherine reported, begun therapy to address what her counselor described as patterns of opportunistic relationship formation and material attachment. I took no pleasure in reports of Elaine's difficulties, but neither did I feel responsibility for them. Her circumstances were the natural consequences of her own choices, the predictable outcome of betrayal and deception. My focus remained firmly on rebuilding my own life rather than monitoring the collapse of hers. Occasionally, in quiet moments, I still found myself questioning how I had failed to recognize the depth of dissatisfaction or duplicity in my own marriage. Had I been genuinely oblivious to Elaine's unhappiness, or had I simply chosen not to see signs that might have disrupted the narrative of successful partnership I had constructed? Had my focus on professional achievement created space for her deception, or would someone determined to deceive have found opportunity regardless of circumstances? These questions had no definitive answers, but the process of considering them proved valuable in its own right. I emerged from this period of reflection with a deeper understanding of my priorities and values, a clearer sense of what I sought in relationships of all kinds, and a hard-earned wisdom about the importance of genuine alignment between partners. Nearly 18 months have passed since that Wednesday afternoon when I returned early from Tokyo to find my life fundamentally altered. The experience, painful as it was, has provided insights and growth opportunities one might never have encountered otherwise. That I've learned about resilience, the capacity to absorb profound betrayal and disappointment without allowing it to permanently distort one's view of others or relationships. I've discovered that trust, once broken, can be cautiously rebuilt with new people who demonstrate consistency between words and actions. That I've gained appreciation for the legal and financial protections I once took for granted. Patricia Winters, who continues to handle my estate planning and other legal matters, has helped me establish structures that would better protect my assets in future relationships, not from a place of paranoia, but from one of prudent awareness. Most significantly, I've come to understand that revenge, in its conventional sense, is often unnecessary. Elaine's carefully constructed extraction from our marriage contained within it the seeds of its own punishment. The calculation and deception that enabled her initial escape also ensured that new relationships formed on that foundation would inevitably collapse under the weight of mutual opportunism and distrust. Had I dedicated myself to actively destroying Elaine socially or professionally, I would have remained tethered to the betrayal, allowing it to define my subsequent choices and experiences. Instead, by focusing on legal and financial protection while rebuilding my own life according to authentic values, I created space for natural consequences to unfold. I still experience moments of anger or grief about what happened. Occasionally, yes, though with diminishing frequency and intensity. These emotions are natural responses to significant loss and betrayal, and I've learned to acknowledge them without allowing them to dictate my actions or outlook. The condominium, now fully renovated, has become genuinely mine in a way it never was during my marriage. The artwork on its walls reflects my personal aesthetic rather than carefully curated status symbols. The furniture is selected for comfort and function rather than to impress visitors. It is a home rather than a showcase, and I find far greater satisfaction in that authenticity. That my relationship with Claire continues to develop, characterized by transparent communication and mutual respect. We move forward cautiously, each bringing lessons from past relationships into our shared experience. Whether this particular connection proves lasting is perhaps less important than the fact that it has restored my belief in the possibility of genuine partnership. Professionally, I have found new satisfaction in mentoring younger colleagues, sharing not just technical knowledge, but guidance on maintaining personal balance amid professional ambition. My own experience has made me more attentive to the impact of extended travel and intense work periods on personal relationships, more cognizant of the importance of genuine connection alongside career advancement. If there's a philosophy I've developed through this experience, it might be described as vigilant optimism, a willingness to engage openly with people and opportunities while maintaining appropriate awareness of potential risks and misalignments. This approach has served me well across all domains of life, from personal relationships to professional engagements to financial decisions. For Elaine, I wish her neither harm nor particular success. She is the author of her own story, as I am of mine. Our narratives intersected for a significant period before diverging dramatically, and that divergence has ultimately led me to a more authentic life than we shared together. The justice I sought through legal channels was obtained. The social consequences I might have actively pursued manifested naturally through her own actions and their ripple effects. The emotional resolution I needed came not from seeing her suffer, but from rebuilding a life that better reflects my true values and priorities. In the end, my revenge was simply this. I survived her betrayal, protected what was rightfully mine, and emerged stronger and wiser. I refused to allow her actions to permanently diminish my capacity for trust or happiness. I reclaimed my narrative from the one she had attempted to impose through deception. That, I believe, is the most satisfying form of revenge, not the active destruction of another, but the deliberate construction of a better life in the aftermath of betrayal. It is a revenge that heals rather than wounds, that builds rather than destroys, that ultimately liberates both parties to face the natural consequences of their own choices and actions. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe to our channel for more real-life accounts of betrayal and its consequences. Remember, these stories are shared not to promote vengeance, but to illustrate the human capacity for resilience in the face of profound betrayal. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better.